Hi, my name is Lorena, and today's topic we will be discussing is it racism or classism and understanding the overlap. So, what I used to think of just normal experiences in my life were actually profoundly shaped by a long history of racism, colonialism, and equality. And realizing that this pushed me to reflect more deeply on my own life and my family's life as immigrants, trying to find a place in a society shaped by both race and class. These reflections became even more meaningful after taking this class. I began to see racism and classism not just as personal biases, but as powerful systems built, protected, and reinforced by laws, institutions, and cultural norms. Growing up in a Peruvian immigrant family, I noticed early on the subtle yet powerful internalized racism that can be even within our own communities. I remember my grandmother and my mother would often talk about skin tone, whether it was my skin tone or theirs. And this has been happening since I was very young. If I was lighter or if they were lighter, they would say something in the terms of, oh, you look brighter. So instantly, oh, you must be happier. But then when I spent time outside or at the beach and my skin got darker, their tone would change, more of a negative tone. And they would ask me if there was something wrong with me, and they would worry and basically hint at me that somehow I didn't look well. And there was even a time where it got to me and I started using things to brighten my skin, products, where I just wanted to be lighter as well. And genuinely believing that having darker skin wasn't a good thing. So this class opened my eyes to the fact that these ideas about being lighter are not just family quirks. They come from a much larger history that stems from colonialism, which taught us to see whiteness as better and people like my family to just assimilate. Reading Not a Nation of Immigrants by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz was eye-opening, but also upsetting. And I learned that the United States never intended to be inclusive. Instead, immigration rules were created to favor some groups and exclude others, based on racism and taking of indigenous lands. That realization made me angry, but also gave me clarity. That my family's struggles were not personal failures of theirs, but more it was a predictable outcomes of a country built on unfairness, exclusion, and racial hierarchy. Jacqueline Batterola's Birth of a Nation exposed how whiteness itself was legally constructed to grant power, citizenship, and protection to Europeans, while excluding others. And learning that race was deliberately created as a tool of control was appalling and disturbing. And Matthews Desmond's The Kind of Problem Poverty Is helped me understand how classism and racism are deeply connected in everyday life. Poverty is often blamed on individuals instead of being as a problem built into society. This allows institutions to punish people for things outside of their control. This connects strongly to my mother's experiences, for example, in healthcare. Because she doesn't speak English and uses Medi-Cal, she is often almost immediately treated with little respect at a doctor's appointment. And her insurance becomes a visible sign of social status, showing how class and race combine shape the treatment they give her. Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow was a heavy read for me, and just like watching the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay, both showed me how these systems changed forms from slavery to segregation to mass incarceration. The criminal justice system is still used to control and target Black Americans. Learning this filled me with grief and frustration, especially realizing how normalized these systems have become. On the last week's Tonight episode on Trump-era deportations, showed me how immigrant enforcement continues to target Black and brown communities. It reinforced the idea that some lives are treated as disposable. And this reminded me of my father, who was a Latino man in construction, and how clients often assume his work is low quality or cheap just because of his skin color and accent, and he's working with his hands. I've also noticed how differently I'm treated when I'm alone as compared to when I'm with my boyfriend, who is white, blonde, blue-eyed person. And I noticed that when I'm with him, I get better service, more attention, compliments, and respect. And even though that difference is subtle, it's deeply revealing. One of the things that really stuck out to me was when I learned about the manifest destiny and policies like the Indian Removal Act, the Chinese Exclusion Act, Jim Crow laws, and La Operación. It was overwhelming, it was shocking, and very depressing. But at the same time, I couldn't believe that these things actually happened. Like that religion and law were used to justify displacement, stealing, abuse, and death, all in the name of God and progress. Very shocking. The weight of this history filled me with anger towards whiteness itself. So learning about critical race theory really helped me process these emotions. Critical race theory explains how racism is built into laws and institutions, not just individual actions. It made me realize that the history I learned as a child was very polished and that violence was softened to protect and comfort, especially white comfort. As a person of color, though, I didn't have that option, right? Just ignore racism. It happened almost daily at school. But white children have that option to just ignore it. But denial allows racism to continue to be unchallenged. And without acknowledgement, change cannot begin. I chose to make a video about this because it lets me share my story and connect with its history in a simple and real way. And this project has shown me that racism and classism affects people's lives and are created by systems that have existed for a long time. I also believe that learning about these systems shouldn't divide people, right? It's not about, well, all of white people are this way, because, if that were to be true, my boyfriend's white and so is his family. That would be me being a hypocrite. And I don't believe that. I do very much believe that you should base somebody off of their character and not off of their skin. You also have to face that there is such thing as systemic racism. It's real. And once we see the truth, we can start taking accountability to making things better, and stop just pointing fingers at each other. So thank you so much for listening. I know most of it was read, but one last thing I want to say is that I definitely have, through this class, I've seen how history is repeating itself again and again. And, as a society who likes to progress and think of themselves as have the capability of being better, seeing what's happening right now it's not that. And it's very discouraging and sad. But I do want to say that there is hope and that there is a brighter side to this. There is currently a group of monks who have decided to take a walk for peace. And all they do is try to share compassion, love, in a peaceful way. They're not arguing, they're not telling people what to believe in, it's nothing like that. I think we should all just try a little bit harder to learn from one another, on a personal basis and as a whole. So, with that being said, I want to leave a couple of clips I have found that have, that are of an impact and are related to these kinds of topics. So I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you so much for watching. And sorry if I sounded like a robot sometimes. This is very hard to do, and there's a lot of work. Okay, thank you. Bye.
What is it about the Negro? Easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
I'm asking you, right, to be clear, is this only black and brown unity?
Yes. Is that a problem?
It is.
Okay. Are you saying that black and brown unity is a problem? That for blacks and Hispanics to come together, that offends you or that bothers you?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so what is your question? I don't hear your question yet.
I'm asking
what concerns you?
Why is it unified with this?
Why? Because blacks and Hispanics, we have a shared history of oppression. We're family. And the only reason why we don't understand that we're family is because of your people. You have separated us, but we are family. The history that we're standing on right here in the Alamo, do you know the history of the Alamo? What's the history of the Alamo? Tell me.
Do you really want to get into this?
The history of the Alamo is this, is that white settlers came into Tejas, which belonged to Mexico.
Right.
And they brought slaves into Mexico. And because Mexicans had love for Negroes, they fought white settlers who wanted to have Negro slaves and said that slavery is illegal.
Right.
That's what happened. General Santa Anna came and went to war with this slave holding bastard, Sam Houston and Davy Crockett, right? And went to war with them because they didn't want Negroes in slavery under the hands of Caucasians.
Right. Right.
That's what happened.
That's
Mexicans went to war, went to battle against your people to free us from under your oppression and your hand.
Right.
And when you have Donald Trump ordering ICE agents to Hispanics, we want to let them know that since you fought for us, we are here right now fighting for you.
Right.
Now, do you have a problem with that? Do you have a problem with that? Because I don't think that you have a problem with white unity.
With violence in the streets of Tehran and here at home, we wanted to end tonight with a few steps toward peace. More than 2 months ago, a small group of Buddhist monks began a pilgrimage, a walk from Texas to Washington. They haven't gotten a lot of attention on national television, but online and on the road, They're bringing people together in ways we rarely see. When 20 monks left their Buddhist temple in Fort Worth, Texas, 81 days ago, there was little fanfare. They planned to walk to Washington, some 2,300 miles away. At first, few passers-by knew who they were. This thin line of silent monks, accompanied by their dog Aloka, picked up as a stray on an earlier walk in India. But with each step and each day that passed, word began to spread. It was, they said, a pilgrimage, not about politics, but about peace. In their words, to raise awareness of loving kindness and compassion across America and the world. In